Now.
Hello, here we are again, Lucy McCarraher with her difficult last name, and Lisette Schuitemaker with my very difficult last name. We're both 70, and we are doing a weekly podcast on how it is to be this age. Hi, Lucy. How are you this week?
Hello, Lisette. I am well, thank you. Yes, I've had a quite a busy week since we last spoke. So how about you?
I am well. I'm well. I would say I've had a beautiful week.
Oh, good. That's nice.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to?
Well, a highlight of my week was actually on Sunday when I wrote a book about widowing and about loss and about how women, find it in themselves to go on after a big loss, the loss of their partner. And so sometimes I'm asked by people to do a session, and we had an amazing session with people who are in palliative care, end of life care, photographers on funerals, funeral organizers. And you know, I just have such admiration for people who do that work, who come into families in very intimate circumstances and
Yeah.
then navigate both the feeling and whatever it is that needs to be done.
Yes, it's I think it's a very special time that people have to have particular skills and particular kind of empathy. I mean, it's a very relevant time of life for us now we're 70. I mean, I think
Yeah.
neither of us have luckily so far been widowed. But your mother was, and I guess we both have friends who have been widowed, and obviously at the age of 70 this is going to happen more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's also what kind of book you said about this podcast that the idea came into your head fully formed. Well, I had this title for this book, which in Dutch is Weduwe, hoe werkt dat?
What's the
Which would be like widowing. How does that work? Because it's like to be a widow is like a verb. It's kind of an active thing. You have to
Yes,
find out
yes.
how to be that. And it came into my head kind of fully formed. And then I spoke with widows, women I knew. It was amazing to have those conversations and ask, the things that we don't usually ask.
No, no, how interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, when your partner gets, the tiding that not all is well within the body, or it's actually really very bad.
Yeah.
Woman said to me, and I know her from my student days. She said, there's actually two paths. One is coming to terms with how it is to die, and the other one is coming to terms with how it is to lose. So you're very much together, but you're also there's a split in the road from that moment. And so to kind of pry a little bit about how that was also for her, because very often when people are sick, all the attention also goes to the sick person, and not so much attention goes to the person who is, doing the caring and the cooking and all those things that you used to do together.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
How very interesting. And
It
yes,
was
I mean, that's the book of yours I know probably least about, perhaps. So has it been a very popular book? I mean, obviously you're asked to speak on the basis of it. Has it?
well, it's a book. It's very difficult because it's only in Dutch. It's the one book that hasn't been translated and published in English. Also, it's a book. I think in hindsight, although it came fully formed, I would have called it different because people buy it for a friend who has been widowed, and then they don't know when to. Is
Yeah.
it early to give it to them now? Is it too late? Should I have read it? But I'm reading other things. It's not my thing now. But it's also, and that whole thing, that was actually also part of the session, when to step forward in situations as a professional, in that end of life or funeral field. And and make an offering or give people a nudge to speak about something that you feel is in the room but is not addressed, to have the courage to go there. So, but people buy it and then they don't know when to give it. And so it's a bit of a difficult book, but I think it's a book we all ought to read. Obviously, I think that because there is so much discomfort. I was speaking to a widow. He's lost his husband 4 months ago, and I said to him, "There's so much discomfort." He said, "Oh, people are so uncomfortable. They
Yeah.
don't know how to approach me. They don't know what to say. So the bereaved person has to accommodate, in there, and they're not in the best of places in themselves, and they have to accommodate."
Yes.
Their friends and family and people further away. So I think it's good to educate ourselves on what is helpful to people who have suffered bereavement.
Yes, I wish your book was in English. I mean, I have a friend at the moment who is the same age as us and who has very recently just lost a partner comparatively unexpectedly. She's not, I haven't been close to her for a long time. I'm not physically, geographically near her. She's very much on my mind at the moment, but I really don't know whether to drop her an email and say, "How are you?" Because that sounds such a trivial kind of trite thing to say, or, suggest, I really am completely at a loss as to how to be supportive in a way that will be helpful as opposed to just, and it's, I don't want it to sound as if it's about me, I'm worrying about you, I'm thinking about you. It's,
Yes, but I think, I think do reach out because there's such a barrier for reaching out. So people are actually also sometimes quite lonely and go like,
yeah,
has nobody noticed, this big thing that's happened to me? And so if you reach out and then do say, I'm thinking about you. You're on my mind. And I think of, the times we've shared and we're not so close now. So do make it about you because saying, how are you? One of the widows said, that is like a question that is so big that I couldn't even begin
no,
to answer it. So her tip was to say, if people say, how are you right now? That is actually useful because then
oh,
I can kind of be in touch, but with a text that is maybe a bit much. But I think if somebody just sends a mail, I do this with people who are sick. I have a few friends in really horrid, cancer treatments, and I try to send them, a picture of like I took a picture of a Christmas bowls and decoration, and I
mhm.
sent it to them just as a notice of, you're ill, but you're not forgotten. I think of you, and I'm not going to ask all the time, how are you? How are you? Because, yeah.
No, no, that is a very useful tip, and I will reach out and I will say, "How are you right now?" That's, thank you for that.
Yeah. So, how about your week?
Well, my week's been surprisingly busy for me. I'm really quite antisocial. I do a lot of kind of communicating on Zoom and, sort of,
And on
but
LinkedIn.
yes, indeed. But I tend to stay at home. I do get overwhelmed by kind of socialization. But this week I went to the University of East Anglia, which is just up the road from me, to hear the novelist Ali Smith speak. And not only did I go, but I invited a friend who's also a novelist to go with me, which was sort of, so that was interesting. I mean, I can't say it was earth-shattering, but it was certainly interesting. And I always like to hear just how other creative people just talk, basically, not necessarily what they say about their creativity, but it was interesting because Ali Smith is very, I think, talkative. I mean, she was asked questions by the audience, and that they were interesting questions, and she gave very, very interesting, spontaneous, and lengthy and digressive, interesting responses. But both my friend and I, when we came out, we both said, "I wonder if she's like that at home. I don't think I could cope with that if I lived with her," which is So, but then we thought, well, maybe that's the performative side of being a well-known novelist, that you actually have to go out and sort of talk about your work and your life and things. And so who knows? But it was interesting, and so that was on Thursday. I think I did that. Then on Friday, I went to stay the night with my husband, Richard, the company he works for, which is a Finnish company, but they had a team weekend away at this most beautiful place called Walterton Hall, which is about an hour away in North Norfolk for me. And I'd literally never heard of it before because it's not open to the public. It only sometimes
Mm.
allows people to, sort of the commercial kind of staying there. And it was like being in Downton Abbey. I don't know if you know what Downton Abbey is.
I know Downton Abbey. Yes, I
So
do.
it was amazing. We were put in the state suite. So we had this enormous bedroom and an enormous bathroom with, a bath in the middle of the room and a shower room and a separate toilet. And it was just, and the whole place was just stunning. And it was just really made me think about, I mean, it's not it's a big company in terms of it's worldwide. But the UK team is probably 15 to 20 people. Everybody was invited for the weekend and their partners. It was beautifully done. There was lovely food, there was entertainment, and it just
Oh.
made me think that, and the whole team absolutely love their CEO. And it's sort of that kind of generosity and appreciation for the people you work with that was, so apparent that it was such a worthwhile. I mean, it must have cost a fortune, but that's not my problem. But it was, but it was lovely. So that was. I went on Friday night, and Richard was there for the whole weekend. Then I went to see my mum on Sunday, as I always do, and then I went to stay the night with my son, who is in North London, and his family, which was also lovely. And interestingly, he and and Kate, his wife, had sort of listened to the podcast and was quizzing me about various things I'd said, particularly about class and my sense of kind of dislike of entitlement. And then yesterday I had lunch with some of my women who are in my mastermind group, which was lovely. Actually, it was going to be a bigger lunch, but we've had Storm Bert here, which has wrecked railways and other things. So actually, there were only four of us, but that was very nice. And now I'm home again. So that was quite a busy week for me.
Yeah, interesting. It's also interesting how you mentioned that your son is finding out things about you through this podcast. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Have you had any kind of responses like that from family
No,
or
I
friends?
haven't. I haven't. Not yet, actually. So, no, not yet. But maybe your fan club is a bit more active than mine.
Well, it's just,
But it's also, I'm a homebody too. I love to be home. And this evening I have a thing, kind of a benefit thing, and there's a great friend of mine. I've known her since our student days, and she asked me along, and I said, "Oh, of course." And it was far away, and now it's today, and I go like, "Oh, do I really have to go?" It's like over an hour's drive, but I know that when I go out, there is sparks and conversations and inspirations that I cannot generate here
yeah, yeah,
on my own.
exactly.
So yeah.
Yes. For me, I feel I have to kind of hold a balance between not being too insular and just enjoying being in my own little bubble at home, and not sort of being too not overloading myself too much, because then it takes I think it takes me a long time to process social engagement. And sometimes it goes on too long afterward. I actually, if I've been to a I don't know, a big event or something, I often can't sleep the night following it because my mind is just going over stuff and conversations, and often things I wish I'd said or wish I hadn't said, or
Oh, the ideal person we could be, the
exactly.
exquisite socialite we could be. Yeah.
Yes, yes, indeed.
No,
Yes.
but I recognize that I need time to process, and I also need to guard that balance. And sometimes I kind of plan it because things fit in my diary, but it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily fit in my like inner diary. And I can do oh yeah, I can do that evening. And then I'm like, wow, I have things 4 evenings in a row. I just,
Yes, yes, that's
and
exactly the
maybe
kind
some
of.
of that is age.
Maybe, maybe. I mean, I think I've always been an introvert in that sort of way. I mean, I am much better, and generally, I enjoy more, kind of like our conversations one to one. Or, I mean, I was supposed to be meeting up with 8 other women yesterday, and there were four of us in total. And there's a little part of me, although I wanted to see everybody who was supposed to
Mm,
be coming.
mm.
There was a little part of me that thought, "Oh, it's only four people.
Yeah.
That'll be easier in some ways. That'll be more intimate, and I'm not good at. I don't know. I'm not good at kind of putting myself into bigger conversations. I
Now,
don't know.
I'm also an introvert, but I think I taught myself, and especially between my 20s and my 30s, I kind of taught myself how to be extroverted, uh, and how to, yeah, how to insert myself in bigger conversations or in bigger groups, and how to step forward and not be like this wallflower that my shy introverted person would, like
Yes.
to be. But it was really, yeah, something I learned in the third decade of my life.
Well, let's talk about our third decade. So, from when we were 20 to 30, we were not very much in touch at that time at all. So, I don't actually know what was happening in your life between when you were 20 and 30. So give me a potted story of that decade for you.
Yes, and I was not at your wedding at age 20. I ought to have been there.
I'm
Like, why
so
was I
sorry.
not so in touch?
I
I think
feel
I
very
was
bad that you weren't
naively.
invited.
Well, you didn't know where I lived at the time, I think. But anyway, and we did not have, of course, all these communication tools. I think in my 20s, between my 20 and 30, I was very much in my own world. And it was the decade of, finding out who am I, and very much trying to be who I thought I ought to be. And so in my student days, I was finally part of the popular group.
Oh, well done.
Well done. And even so, that the student association that I belonged to has, several boards. And so there was one board. I was the first girl, let's say, they asked. And I was so stunned. I was so surprised because of, I'd never been in that position before. And they thought it was all quite, of course they would ask me. And it triggered, and I've had this later too, this whole what I attribute to being eldest daughter. Like, you're the baby, you're the center of attention, you're the ideal child, but then there's another one, so you must have be a bit of been a bit of a disappointment.
It
So
all
also
goes
on board,
horribly
I thought
wrong.
I'm sure to be a bit of a disappointment here, and that's one of the threads that is in my life. But
Oh God, mine too. I'm always feeling I must be a disappointment to people. That's an eldest daughter thing, is it, do you think?
I think so, because I think at a very early age, this is called a moment of dethronement in happy families where the child is wanted and there is attention from the parents. The first child, and you have had children, mothers have said to me, the first child, the second miracle isn't as big as miracle as the first one, that. And everything is new for the parents. And then all of a sudden, there's this other baby in our mother's arms. So we must have been a bit of a disappointment.
That's very
I
rude.
attribute it to eldest daughters, and it may have other sources as well. But yeah, so that was I thought it was going to be a disappointment, but also, yeah, I was depressed, I think, when I was writing my thesis, which was kind of a lonely place to be and do all my research. And I had moved out from Leiden, student houses, and lived in The Hague. And it was really it's been the worst time of my life.
Really,
Oh,
really.
I was so Oh, even thinking of it, there were days where I resolved at some point never to speak again
Gosh.
because I thought everything I say is just, we hurt each other so much as people, even if we don't intend to. And I don't know, there's the fairy tale of I think it's the sisters of Cinderella, aren't they? Or someone, when they speak, all that comes out is like vipers and snakes and poison
Yes, yes.
and rats. And I felt like that. I felt when I speak, it's just that, so I better not speak. And I
Oh,
think
how awful.
it's awful. And the only thing really, I mean, this is a bit of a confession online, but what kept me going was my fantasy of how I would end it.
Yeah, I have. Yes, I've read that or heard that as well. Just the knowledge that you can end it if you choose to, is helps you keep going. In fact, that's
And I
extraordinary.
was, I mean, my fantasy was that I would drown myself in a canal. There's lots of water in the Netherlands, lots of canals, but the technicalities of doing that, is how I would need, kind of stones to weigh me down. And I would have to kind of rope them around my waist or put them in, and then how to be on the street with those. I mean, it couldn't just be a pebble, it needed to be something heavy. So then I thought, and I'm there with this kind of boulder. And then if somebody comes and asks, what are you doing? I'm going to drown myself, oh, that will not work. So, but, it was really the only thing. And that depression was depressing who I truly am and trying to be the ideal person I thought I ought to be.
Gosh, I'm so sorry
And
you went through that. I had no idea. That's
yeah,
horrible.
you know, now this is long ago and far away, and I feel it has, it's, I've also mined a depth in me through that for instance, when I am with, the funeral and end of life people, I go to that depth of feeling and I don't need to be in those dark places and not as long. And I've learned so much about depression. And yeah, at some point I can tell you what I did to get out of it or to
Well, I'd be
not
interested.
need to go there.
Yeah, tell us now if it's feasible.
Yeah, so there's many, many components. I mean, I was depressed, repressing who I truly was. So I think between 20 and 30, that's the whole point, trying to find out who you are and who you're not, and who you're supposed to be, but who you can't be. And so there was part of, I don't look like it, but I am a hippie inside. I am, and we spoke about being more left wing than our family. So that was something to own up to, but I did not have role models. So how to be that? I had a role model for being kind of more left wing and posh, as you say. That was so, and I didn't have friends who I feel. I mean, I became a vegetarian when I was 17, and I did not know vegetarians. I just thought, animals eat one another, but they can't think about it. They just do it, but I can think about it. So is that what I want to be part of? No. But, that was exceptional. So all through, so that was also quite funny. While I was trying to prove that I could be part of the popular group and, there was like this vegetarianism. I mean, there were all kinds of things that popped out. And my friend said, but you were always like that. And I said, yes, but I was trying to hide it. And they said, never really worked. We like that about you. So there was this whole misunderstanding. And I think, now on social media too, you can project this wonderful person that you are, but inside you're kind of insecure and maybe different and maybe not so ideal. So there's part of that. And there's also, I've had to deal with anger.
Anger about what particularly?
Well, I call it my anger at God, my anger that in this world, I see on this planet that we are in an experiment of cohabitation with each other, with the rest of all living beings on this planet. And we make a mess all the time, all the time. It's so hard to live together for us as humans. And we hurt each other so deeply that I just couldn't accept that whole premise of life. And and so I was just enraged. But of course, I mean, and rage wasn't really acceptable. And I was supposed to be a good girl and a nice girl and the eldest daughter and the wise one. So I repressed that too. And I've had to learn to feel the rage, not direct it at anyone, certainly not directed to myself. And also, what I used to do is turn the rage very quickly into sadness and grief.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what so many young people feel today, why there's such an epidemic of poor mental health. I mean, I guess, very much from in people in their 20s today, and whether
Yeah.
that is very much to do with rage at the state of the world, but turned into sadness. That's such a good description of and how difficult it is to function when you are in that kind of mental environment, I suppose, and not feeling able to do anything about it. It's the lack of agency as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of the rage is also projected out on social media. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so
Yes.
much violence against all kinds of people. So that is the projecting out. And then there is this, and sadness is like a swamp. You know, you kind of drown in it. And I could sit in it. And I think the longest I've been in there is like 7 months. And it's so heavy and it's so black and it's so yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so work with rage, feel the rage, not be the rage, but feel the rage. And once I could feel the rage, rage kind of burns itself up. It's like, this bonfire and then it burns itself up. And then, I don't need to sit in that grief for very long. So those are two elements that I have learned. And yeah, I went to therapy first when I was in my like later 20s. And yeah, and in between, I was also happy. I had boyfriends. I became engaged.
And then unengaged, presumably.
Yes, but I became engaged. I think for the same reason that you married. I was moving in with with this person, with this man, and I thought, oh, my parents will just. And it was such a sign of the times that we
Yeah.
both, I think, tried to protect our parents from the horrible shame and they would feel about having their eldest daughter move in,
Behaving like hippies.
being like hippies, like, oh. So I became engaged. And then actually, I had a dream twice. I had a dream of me in the big white dress with my father in a church and him giving me away. And so there was my bridegroom to be. And then this question was asked, will I take this man to be the and I said no in the dream.
Well, that's a pretty good indication of how you were feeling.
Yes, and in the dream, and I heard, and I can still hear this. I heard, my friends and family in the church, everybody go like, huh? And
How
when I had the
funny.
dream twice, yeah, I said to him, I kind of go on with this. And he was flabbergasted. He had no idea. Well, I had no idea, but I was playing all that actually. So I think that is one of the strongest moments of my life when I listened to that inner prompting and went with it. And it took me on a whole different path, but on my path. So
Yes, gosh, it makes me feel like my 20s were very sort of superficial compared to yours. I don't think I went on. I mean, I did, I think, do a lot of learning, but I didn't go to the depths that you did. I mean, I went to Australia, which is not the same thing at all. Kind of
I think that's
unexpectedly.
very adventurous and very far away. But let's start. You got married at age 20.
I did, yes, yes, and then we went to Australia, and I think, I mean, I was expecting us, I think, to be more hippie-ish and less focused on careers, but I have a feeling, and I don't know this for sure because I've never actually asked him about it, but that Rob, my then husband, felt that because we were married, he then had to have a job and support me. While I expected us to kind of go on being a bit studenty and him to be a theatre director and me to do some acting and, sort of, but he very much was looking. I mean, perhaps it's a perfectly reasonable thing to be doing. He'd finished his masters and was looking for workers, looking for lecturing jobs. And there was nothing in England at the time. It was sort of 1975, 76, and there was, that it was very depressed then. There were no jobs. It was not a good time. So he got two options. One in Nigeria to go and be a lecturer there, which I'm kind of glad we didn't take. And I think Idi Amin was in power at the
Oh,
time. And one in Australia. And we went to Australia for him to take up a lectureship in drama in a new drama and theatre arts department, which was fantastic. And I hadn't even finished my degree. I had been to already to two universities because I started off going to Liverpool to do psychology. Then I met Rob. He was in his last year, so he was moving to do his MA in Leeds, and I couldn't possibly be left on my own or, not go with him. So I managed to, actually, I think my father did this. I managed to move and go to Leeds University, which wasn't kind of normal. But I started again and I realized that I actually didn't want to do psychology. I wanted to do English because I was very into drama and theatre by then. And so I had sort of, by the time we went to Australia, I had two first years behind me. And when we got to Australia, the point was I was going to finish my degree. So I kind of started again doing English and drama there. And of course, Rob was teaching me. It was very odd. And he was putting on student productions, and I was expecting to be cast in them. And he was like, I can't cast you in the lead role. You're my wife. And I was, why not? I'm the best person for this role. And so, I mean, no, it was, I mean, I did do lots of acting there, and that was great. But at the same, as soon as we got to Australia, Rob had this idea. I mean, I suspect it was one of those things that came to him fully formed, that we were going to start a monthly theatre
frozen.
magazine
Sorry,
because,
sorry. There was a moment where you were frozen and I lost you.
oh,
But
oh,
as soon as we went to Australia, that's where,
oh dear. Well, I hope I'm back.
yes, you're back.
Oh, good. So yes, we started a monthly theatre magazine out of our house when he was just starting a new job. I was supposed to be doing my degree, and it was, on the face of it, completely insane. I mean, Australia had wonderful theatre going on at the time, and it needed a magazine. It needed to be chronicled. But, we were two English people who had just flown in knowing nothing about Australian theatre. But Rob had this extraordinary kind of energy and ability to meet people and network, exactly what, I did not have in any way. So we managed to get funding for it. There was arts funding in those days, which you'd never get for it now. And we ended up running this monthly theatre magazine for 8 years and making it sort of somehow work. I mean, it never made any money. As I say, it was funded. We managed to get advertising from theatre companies and things. It was completely, and it took up so much time. We would, usually be working till 2 o'clock in the morning every night. I mean, it was, I was expecting to go over and have a nice studenty life doing my degree, not working incredibly hard, and actually turned out to be completely the opposite. And it was incredibly hard. It was my first experience of employment, well, apart from sort of summer jobs and things. And it was, I mean, actually, it was an extraordinarily useful experience because we kind of had to learn about publishing from scratch. And it was before anything was online. So, publishing. We had to, everything was done on paper, on boards, with galley proofs, with pens, and marking up actual photos for the magazine. And there were
And lots of
crazy.
proofreading,
Yes, yes.
proofreading again, and yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, funnily enough, now the magazine, which we must have done, 70 odd editions of, is now in I mean, it's in the National Library in Canberra. It's in all the editions are there. It's in university libraries. It is an absolute kind of key resource for Australian theatre. It's been put onto microfiche, and what we thought we were just well, what I thought we were just kind of churning out on a monthly basis. And the people who wrote for it were incredible as well. They're the kind of luminaries of Australian theatre at that time. So it was, and
I
what that
love it.
led, yeah, what that led me into is that I got asked to review theatre on our local TV station. We were in a city called Newcastle, which was sort of north of Sydney. And then I was offered my own to co-host a weekly arts and entertainment program. So I became, a TV presenter, which I absolutely loved. I mean, haven't, it didn't last very long. I was probably doing it for about 3 years. But I mean, those sorts of opportunities would never have come my way if we'd stayed in England. And Rob also went on to host his own arts and entertainment show on ABC television. So it was an extraordinary time, really.
Those were the days when we were young and, the world wasn't as formalized as it is now. And I remember, Lucy, my mother telling me that you were on television
Oh,
and
really?
I felt in her telling me that she was a bit like, you should do that too. Why are you not on television?
Oh no, that's
No, no,
terrible.
but not in a bad way. But I do remember the kind of awe we had for you going out there to Australia. And I think what you did is very entrepreneurial. You say, your first employment, but it was actually totally entrepreneurial and very Pippi Longstocking. I've never done it, so I think I can do it. I don't know how you say that in English, but it's very much,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I mean, Rob was very much like that, and he was very entrepreneurial, and I just sort of followed along, I suppose. But I did find out that I was very good at organisation and managing people and keeping to deadlines in a sort of quiet kind of way. And whereas he was the front person and went out and sold the magazine, talked about it, I actually made it happen in the background. So that was useful personal development, I suppose. But I mean, the thing about being on television then was that it was a massive opportunity that, I mean, now anybody can be on a screen. You can go on TikTok. We're here kind of on YouTube. And we can make it happen for ourselves now. But at the time you couldn't. And being on television really was a big thing. And so it was and I think I did discover through that I did also really enjoy performing, not just as an actor with other people's lines to say, but in kind of creating I suppose, a persona for myself and interviewing other people. And, I mean, I interviewed Mel Gibson and Tom
I know
Stoppard.
somebody who has interviewed Mel Gibson.
Well, I mean, honestly, I saw his final drama school production. It was The Hostage by Brendan Behan. And he was all I could, we all knew that he was earmarked to be a star, but I mean, he was like 21. He wasn't much younger than me. And he was gorgeous then. And then he got the role of Hamlet in the Nimrod Theatre, which was very kind of cool for him to go straight from drama school pretty much to playing Hamlet. And this was before Mad Max or anything. And he was so shy. I was very shy. We were sitting in this rehearsal room. I was trying to interview him. All his answers were yes, no, So it was a very awkward interview, but it wasn't for television. I then had to write it up, so I kind of invented slightly more detailed answers from him.
But it's
But
interesting, like he was between 20 and 30, and he had
mm,
to learn who he was and who he could be, and how beautiful that you saw this, magnetic actor at this very young age, is when he was just starting to bud.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And no, it was extraordinary. And even while I was in Australia, he went on to do Mad Max. He did a lot of other films as well. He did theatre. And in fact, I was at university with his brother, who was they came from the family came from Newcastle, where we were based. So yes, no, it was an interesting time
But
indeed.
one thing, to come back to that, you said because you were married, Rob thought he had to be like the husband and lead kind of a more yeah, mainstream
Conventional,
life,
yes.
conventional. That was the word I was looking for. And I think that was exactly why I've never really wanted to get married, because I see that forms, you know, have power over us. And once I get married, this dynamic of, the man being the provider and the woman doing the house, which I have no interest in and I'm not good at, and I don't know anything. So, I've always kind of been a bit scared, so to say, of the marriage form, because it is kind of charged with such ages of, very fixed roles. And
Yes.
so when I
No,
hear
I
you
do
say this,
understand
it's like,
that. But
wow.
yeah, I mean that was never the format of marriage that we had, though. I was
No.
always going to be
Yeah.
working, always did work, and I suppose I had a slightly different role model from you because although my mother did not have paid work while she was married, she worked for charities. She became the chair of big charities. She was working, she wrote books. So I didn't have the
Yeah.
same role modeling as you because your mother was very much the wife at home and your father
Yeah.
was the yes,
Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
your
No.
father was an entrepreneur as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was an entrepreneur within a family business, not our family.
Right,
It's a
right.
worldwide business, but they still are to this day very entrepreneurial. So he thought up new businesses and
Yes. I mean, I was
whatever.
just thinking when you said that, what we had done with the magazine was entrepreneurial. It was, but nobody used those words at the time.
No.
Nobody I mean, now everything's about, and certainly in my world, everything is about being an entrepreneur, being entrepreneurial, entrepreneur life, everybody. And there's almost a kind of, like you should be an entrepreneur. Don't just go and get a job, but nobody talked like that then. I mean, the word
No.
did not come
No.
across, my horizon at all. So I didn't feel, I mean, it always seemed that what we were doing was just a bit mad, really. And why were we putting ourselves through this? I mean, of course, it was very enjoyable as well, but contrary to most entrepreneurial activities, it wasn't there to make money. There was never any thought that the magazine would be. It was just if we could just keep it going. That was with funding and from various different ways. We had subscriptions and we had advertising, but essentially the bulk of the money came from the Australia Council, which is like the British Arts Council, and every state in Australia has its own arts council. And at the time, they were happy to, make grants to a magazine, which I mean, almost the reason we had to give up in the end was because that time was over. There was, money was tighter. It wasn't, arts funding started to decrease. So
Hmm. Yeah, but if you say, that magazine is in all the libraries, isn't life about how can I serve? Where can I serve? And
absolutely,
my 20s and 30s, I didn't really know. But then after graduation, for half a year, I worked in a temporary deployment agency. How do you call that?
yeah.
And it was a very good reality check after student life and being, in a very kind of privileged surroundings. And then my mother found an ad from a bank that was looking for a person to do the in-house staff magazine. And so I applied. And as soon as I walked into the building in Amsterdam, I walked into that building and I thought, this is my job. And so the whole interview, I was like, this is my job. And they hired me. And from one day to the next, I moved to Amsterdam. And Amsterdam at the time was a rough place. The inner city that now, has tourists by the thousands on Saturdays. You can hardly walk there. It was derelict. It was difficult, and there was a lot of speculation. And then we had the squatters who kind of protested against that. And so I could move to Amsterdam as an anti-squatter because there was a little company, the brother of a friend of mine had started, that said, I will protect, the speculative, or, in my case, a flat that was
Oh, I
renovated, but wasn't
see. Oh,
rented
I
out.
see.
And I
Yes.
had to come there with a mattress, a little table and a chair. And I had to sleep there that same evening of, having lunch with him. And he said, I have something for you. And I had to go there that same evening. And then I was basically the guard there. And
Oh, so you were protecting the building against
yeah,
beings
well, the building, just
against
that apartment. But I
that
lived in that
apartment against
apartment. I paid
squatters. Yeah.
hardly anything. I lived across from where I worked. And I remember, walking the next day to work, and I thought, I'm an Amsterdam citizen. I'm now part of Amsterdam. This is my town.
Oh, lovely. But how interesting that we both sort of started off in magazines. I didn't,
Yeah,
that's I hadn't
yeah.
didn't know that about you either. And there is something about, the running magazines and getting copy in for magazines, working with other writers, content, and the tyranny of, I don't know if yours was monthly or how often it came out, but
Monthly.
it really is a tyranny of getting things into the printer by the right time, getting it distributed, all that, getting it out to readers.
This is what I so love about you, Lucy, because you told me about your magazine. I tell you about the in-house magazine, and I had not put, the two of them together, but you see themes everywhere. And I really enjoy that about our conversation as much. I mean, I enjoy our whole conversation. I hope people who listen do too.
Yes, yes, so do I. I certainly enjoy it. And gosh, I think both of us are kind of have started being, well, I certainly am. And I think you've said stuff today that you said was a kind of almost like a confession that you hadn't talked about before. I think I'm certainly talking about things that I possibly haven't vocalized or even certainly not spoken about to most people in ever, probably. So it's an
That's why
interesting
it is so
process for
interesting
us.
to your son.
Yeah, yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's been lovely. We probably ought
Yeah,
to stop
I think
now.
so. But
But
fortunately, we do it again next week.
yes, yes. Well, lovely to
So,
talk to you, and we
yes,
will chat again next week.
yes. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.